Today we're talking about petite. What is it? Who is it? And what do we do with that? Hey everyone, it's Viv and this is Stitches and Seams. Today we are going to talk about petite, what it is, who it fits, who it doesn't fit. And so in order to be able to show you these things better, I suckered the young one in because she is very petite. So it's harder to show it on myself than it is on another person. So she got voluntold. I'm just kidding. She was asked. She agreed. So this is Lorelei. Basically, the fashion industry's definition of petite is a woman under 5'3". I don't know what they call it for a man. I'm not dealing with men littleness. We're dealing with female petiteness. Okay, so fashion industry defines it as woman 5'3" and under. Okay, so technically I am petite as well. Only by half an inch, but it still counts. Lorelei is 5 foot and a half inch. So she definitely fits the definition. Now, a lot of people seem to think that petite also has to do with width and bust and hips and all that kind of stuff, but it actually doesn't. You can be a petite person and still be a size 18 or a size 24 or a size 0. So it doesn't have anything to do with your bodily circumference measurements. It has to do with your height measurement. So Lorelei at 5 foot and a half inch qualifies as petite. Now we were just taking some measurements right before we started filming because even though I know her measurements and I have them, I guess I wasn't really thinking in terms of petite because to me this is normal. Everybody else is abnormal because they're taller. So this is normal for us because all of my children are shorter. My tallest girl is 5'3". So
5'4".
She's 5'3 and a half. She tries to lie. But anyway, so Jack, for me, is a behemoth. He's, just under 6 foot tall. So he's like crazy tall for me. But this for me is normal. So whatever your normal is, you might want to check your measurements. Now, I am going to reference the Fit for Real People book by Palmer and Plesh. They have a suggestion in here which I think is very good. And what they do is, some of you older people like myself might remember this. They used to do the projector and you would get in front of the projector and they would do the outline of your face and you'd take it home and Happy Mother's Day, Mom. Well, it's kind of like that, but you do it with your whole body. And so you just take a sheet of paper, tape it to the wall, and then shine a light on the body and then have someone else draw around you so that you get an accurate representation of your body. And then you can take these measurements that they talk about in the book. I'll link this book in the description below because I think it has a lot of good information in it for fitting as well as other things of that nature. So anyway, on to the next thing. What I wanted to talk about was the fact that, obviously petite is not just being short. Petite also means being short within sections of your body. So Lorelei here is actually only 13 inches from not over her bust, but from the little dip here to her actual waist, she's only 13 inches. And on her back, turn around for me. Her back length, good Lord. Her back waist length, we'll get there in the end, is actually 15 inches. I'm 15 and a half, and there's 2 1/4 inches difference in our height. But that's our difference in our back. There's only a little bit of a difference there. So she's more leggy than she is torso. which works out fine. It's however you were made. But with this in mind, we have to realize basically that we're going to be shortening almost every single bodice she ever wears. And that's part of the petite game. You need to know where your petiteness is, because I don't have to, even though I have to shorten my length, I don't frequently have to shorten things like thigh length, if that makes sense. I did find one pattern where I need to do some adjusting through the legs, and that's the Bryce Cargo Pants by Hey June Handmade, because they have a knee dart, and so that knee dart needs to hit me at my knee, obviously. So I have to take some length out of both the thigh and the leg, the calf, excuse me. So another place that you might be short or petite, excuse me, not just necessarily your torso, but from your shoulder height to your arm's-eye height, okay? So what I'm talking about is right through here, okay? So you'll know if you're short here because you're gonna have armholes on patterns and stuff like that that are absolutely humongous on you. And so you're gonna have to make this adjustment. And basically what you do is you take your pattern and you would fold out however much you need to fold out. Let me see, I have a piece of paper here. So this were it. You would just fold that out so that it would be the right length, right? And then you would do the same with the sleeve head itself. So you want to work between the notches, not underneath the notches. So the upper part of the sleeve head, not the lower part of the sleeve. When you do that, you don't want to take out too much. You may need to do several. Elizabeth from Elizabeth Made This, she was talking to me because she has to do this on some of her things. You don't want to, if it's more than ½ an inch, she suggests making 2 folds, and because you don't want to take out too much because it could skew the lines of the arm side and in turn the sleeve head. So that is another thing to consider. Turn around. The back waist length is something that I have to deal with. Not too much. I seem to be more torso than legs, unfortunately. But it means I don't have to shorten too many bodices. Like the Orchid Midi, I didn't need to shorten that. I could have, but because of the style that it was, I didn't feel that it was necessary because it's more of a blousey type of bodice. So with the back waist length, you want to make sure that you take your measurements, and you will have normally an elastic around your waist, not a tape measure. You want something that will move so that when they bend, or you bend, you can find your natural waist. And then you just measure from that knobbly bone, bend your head, measure from that knobbly bone to the waist where your elastic falls, and that's going to be your back waist length. And then you can, some patterns will have that information on the pattern itself, or you may need to flat pattern measure. And we can talk about that in another video if you all are interested. Flat pattern measuring is quite useful. If you don't tissue fit, that might be another solution for you so that you can learn to make the adjustments before you ever get into the fabric. So with that, there's those bodice adjustments that you may need to make. And again, if you are like super short here, you may need to take it out of more than one place. And we're also going to talk about later in another video when there's no lengthen and shorten lines. You know, how do you know where to go? How do you know where to take the length or add the length to it? So if you'll step forward just a bit. Okay. So I know this is going to be kind of hard for you guys to see. Sorry. With her legs, it's basically the same. You're going to take the measurement of her outseam, which is from her natural waist to the floor. Okay. And then you're also going to take the, go ahead and turn around. The inseam, which is right at the top of the thigh to the floor. Okay, and you can flat pattern measure that, or it should be listed on the actual pattern. So that's one way to know if you're going to have to make adjustments. It's always easier to make the adjustments before you get into the fabric, as opposed to you go ahead and make the pattern up and then you realize it's too big for you all over the place. So it's a good indication of what adjustments you may or may not need to do. Let's see, what else? Let me refer back to my notes here. One I have to do is crotch length. So, for example, simplicity patterns, or even I think I've used Butterick and also McCall's. When you go to make up, I haven't ever made any of their trousers just because of the issues that I've had with the pajamas. I just don't even bother. When you go to do the crotch, I mean, they'll come up to my underbust area. So it's like, you have to adjust that also. So you need to make sure that you take your crotch length measurement, and that is just through the legs at your waist, front and back, okay? And then you can measure that on your pattern. You need to also make sure when you're flat pattern measuring to account for your seam allowances, whatever they may be. They might be 5/8 of an inch, they might be 3/8 of an inch. Just make sure that if you draw those in prior to measuring, then it'll make it a lot easier on you with the math. So yeah, crotch length, that's one I have to do with a lot of pajama type patterns. Lorelai has to have that as well. So another adjustment that we frequently have to make is the sleeve length. I have little T-Rex arms. I don't know, do you have T-Rex arms? Your arms are longer than mine. Sorry. I have T-Rex arms, she doesn't. So, I mean, we still will have to make sleeve adjustments for her, sleeve length adjustments for her. When I did the Cindy jacket, I actually took, I think it was 3.5 inches off the length of the sleeve, but Style Art lists the sleeve length, so I was able to compare my measurement to the pattern measurement and adjust accordingly before I ever got to the fabric. Circumferences, I have small wrists, small ankles. Yeah, I think we're kind of there together. So that's another one that you may need to adjust, is your circumference, your like openings, your sleeve opening, your ankle opening, my wrist here. Let's see. Another one will be your neck. So also, sometimes people will they'll make a pattern up and they'll have all this excess fabric in here because they're not as wide, right? So you'll have to take that into consideration as well. You can flat pattern measure against your armpit to armpit measurement, and you'll do that, making sure that you account for your your seam allowances, and then you'll have a better idea of where you need to start with that one. The neck opening sometimes will be too large, so you may need to also adjust for that. I think that's all the ones I can think of off the top of my head. I tried to do some research because I don't have to do all these adjustments, and Lorelai doesn't need all of these adjustments. So I was trying to make sure I covered a fair bit of them. So Elizabeth also had another example, which was really interesting because I don't have to do this one. She made a pair of jeans one time and, got them all done. She took the length off the bottom and she went to put her hands in the pockets, and the pockets were down here because her hands weren't, her arms weren't long enough to fit the pockets. So that's something also that you may need to adjust for. Style lines, design lines, those types of things may need to be adjusted so that they sit where they're supposed to on the body according to the pattern. So those are just some things that you can keep in mind when you are a petite person or you're sewing for a petite person. I hope that helps you all out, and we will get further into flat pattern measuring and maybe some petite adjustments in the future. So thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate you all, and we'll see you later. Take care.